Order, order. Thank you all for joining us today. Today's e-petition session has been scheduled to give members from across the House an opportunity to discuss TV licensing. And sessions like this would normally take place in Westminster Hall, but due to the suspension of sittings, we have started holding these sessions as an alternative way to consider the issues raised by petitions and present these to government. We've received more requests to take part than could be accommodated in the 90 minutes that we're able to schedule today. And so even with a short speech limit for backbench contributions, it shows just how important this issue is to members right across the House. So I'm pleased to be holding this session virtually, and it means that members who are shielding or self-isolating and are unable to take part in Westminster Hall debates are able to participate. And I'm also pleased that we have front bench speakers and that we have the Minister attending to respond to the debate today. So with Westminster Hall reopening next week, this should be the last of our sessions. And so I wanted to take this opportunity to really thank the broadcasting team, Hansard, and all of the members and everyone who have been vital to ensuring that these sessions can take place, and to thank ministers and members who have attended these sessions so that we can discuss these important issues that we know petitioners really care about. So to open today's session, I call Jonathan Gullis.
Well, thank you, Chair, and I beg to move that this House has considered e-petition 300118, revoke the TV licence using legislation, which has received 110,839 signatures. I would like to thank the petitioner, Terry Savage, for sharing his reasons for starting this petition in advance of today's debate. Terry started this petition because of the BBC's decision to end the free TV licence for the over 75s. In summary of Terry's views, he feels the BBC licence fee is outdated and not fit for today's society, preferring to see a subscription service, and is asking for the Minister today, along with all those who signed his petition, to revoke the Royal Charter as soon as possible, bringing the BBC into the modern era. Ahead of today's debate, I also spoke to Rebecca Ryan, the Campaign Director for Defund the BBC, Claire Summer, Director of Policy for the BBC, and Andrew Scadding, Head of Corporate Affairs at the BBC. I thank them all for their time and sharing their views. It is no shock that the Defund the BBC campaign share a lot of the concerns and ideas of Terry. They believe that it is a social injustice to legally require people to pay for a service that does not represent them anymore, highlighting the way in which the BBC and some of their employees conducted themselves in the wake of the 2016 Brexit referendum. Stars like Sue Perkins have labelled Leave voters as headbangers and zealots, and Gary Lineker, a well-known Ramona, saying Britain had won the Golden Dumbass Award. Despite this clear breach of impartiality rules, nothing appeared and people in places like Stoke-on-Trent, North Kidsgrove and Tork, which I proudly serve and voted overwhelmingly to leave the EU, felt ostracised and belittled. I say this because I agree with Terry that the BBC licence fee should be scrapped at the next Charter review, and that the government should instantly decriminalise non-payment of the licence fee. I will return to my views, but simply say that my feelings towards the BBC were drastically impacted by its conduct over Brexit, which I campaigned and voted for. Even under a new Director General, political impartiality has still not been tackled, as seen in the BBC's reporting of the Black Lives Matter protest. The BBC's largely peaceful headline somehow avoided the violence that saw police officers injured and property destroyed. They also referred to the apology the BBC was forced to give in the wake of calling a deceased IRA terrorist a veteran. This reckless action besmirched the memory of 1,400 British soldiers who lost their lives during the Troubles and angered our veteran communities like those in Stoke-on-Trent, many of whom served in Northern Ireland. However, to give balance, I will outline views shared by Claire and Andrew. As senior executives in the BBC, I was grateful for their time and was honest with them of where I stood on this matter. They argue that the BBC's own studies show that they are the favoured option. The favoured option is still for the BBC licence fee to remain in place. It also argued that the value for money from the TV licence does not just come out via its broadcast content, but its educational materials, regional radio, and its over £1 billion investment into the UK creative sector. Claire and Andrew put it to me, as I'm sure others will, that adverts are not wanted and a subscription model would cost potentially more than they would currently paying the licence. Simply put, they said that if the BBC licence fee was revoked, then there would be no more BBC as we know it, and people really need to be clear in their minds that that is what they want. They have conducted estimates of the cost of decriminalising the licence fee, which Andrew has said to stand over £1 billion over 5 years, which would inevitably lead to a decline in value for licence fee payers. Lastly, they made it clear that BBC recognises concerns over its lack of impartiality, and work is being done with BBC staff, particularly its journalists, regarding use of their social media and how their views are aired. The challenge set by the new Director General to ensure the BBC represents communities outside the M25 bubble has been accepted, and Andrew and Claire hope the public continue to stand by this British institution. I hope, Claire, the Chair, that I have adequately represented some of the views on both sides of this debate. I do, however, want to clearly state my views and those of the people of Stoke-on-Trent North, Kidsgrove and Tork. Ahead of today's debate, I held a survey on my website for residents of Stoke-on-Trent North, Kidsgrove and Tork to complete, of which nearly 3,000 responded. BBC executives should look away now, as the results won't make for easy viewing. An astonishing 96% of those who took the survey want to see the BBC licence fee scrapped. This overwhelming response should be an urgent wake-up call that something must change at the BBC. Platforms such as Netflix and Amazon Prime have moved with the times. They understand the current mentality of mass consumption, offer a subscription-based service in which the consumer can choose whether they pay to access their goods, and a simple structure for the digital age that offers choice and value for money. With that said, Chair, I can confidently say there is one service which does not offer the value for money, in my opinion, and that is the BBC. And I'm not alone in thinking that either. A YouGov poll from the 4th of January 2021 found that more than 61% of Brits agree that the licence fee is not good value for money. From the 1st of April this year, the British taxpayer will be forking out £159 a year for the BBC content. But what are they paying for? Content produced by individuals pushing out of touch views onto cities and towns such as Stoke-on-Trent, whilst the BBC continue to cave to the wokery on the left by censoring and removing some of its most successful shows. They pride themselves on being a public service broadcaster, yet I find it difficult to understand how they've actually served the public. In a year that has seen many struggling to put food on the table and to keep up with rental payments, our family-friendly BBC has continued to pay virtue-signaling presenters like Gary Lineker a sky-high salary. In a year that has seen grandparents cut off from their loved ones, isolated and alone, the BBC decided it was best to scrap the licence fee for the over-75s. This has caused some serious concerns and stress for many over-75s who now face being taken to court, fined, and even getting a criminal record if they don't pay up. Let us not forget that when Lord Hall, former BBC Director General, accepted the good deal back in 2015, the BBC accepted to take over the funding of the free TV licence to the over-75s, a deal they had years to prepare for, yet are now turning their backs on, pretending such a deal was never agreed to. Chair, I know that this decision has caused serious concern and stress for many over-75s and has disgusted people in Stoke-on-Trent North, Kidsgrove and Tork. In my survey, 87% of people felt that the BBC should prioritise keeping free TV licences for over-75s. And if the BBC were really in tune with the public, they would know that 53% of Britons believe that all those at age 75 and over should get a free TV licence. 61% think it's completely unfair that the licence fee is being increased, and the majority of the British people would rather see the BBC funded via subscription or advertising than the current licence fee model, as reported by YouGov. Families are no longer congregating in their masses to watch Morecambe and Wise or the news at 10. Instead, they are logged in on multiple devices, monitoring and streaming content from various services. If you don't pay for Netflix, Amazon Prime, BritBox or Disney Plus subscription, what happens? Do they launch an investigation? Do they send you letters harassing and threatening you with criminal charges? No. They simply cancel your account, and if you want to access it, then all you have to do is pay. Chair, we are also stuck in the bizarre situation that people are kept in a straitjacket when it comes to paying the licence fee to watch live TV. I know I'm not the only one who thinks this is absurd. In my survey, 97% said that you should not have to have a TV licence to watch other live services such as Sky. But this is not just about a vast organisation reluctant to move with the times, like a polar bear clinging to a receding piece of ice, as Michael Portillo said. This is about social injustice. How is it right that almost a third of women's convictions are not for paying the TV licence fee? According to the Ministry of Justice data, women are 10 times more likely to be convicted for not paying the annual fee than men. The procedure itself is completely discriminatory towards women. 72% of all prosecutions for TV licences were against women in 2018. For them to be slapped with a criminal record simply for answering their door is frankly disgusting. Dame Vera Baird, QC, the victim's commissioner, is in favour of decriminalising failure to pay the licence fee because she argues the law as it stands penalises less well-off women. It is ludicrous that in the 21st century we are continuing to criminalise minor matters such as not paying your licence fee. It is a waste of police time and resources. However, it is not just the licence fee that is unpopular. The biggest issue here is that the BBC is in breach of the obligation set out in its own charter. So where has the BBC been in breach of its charter? Firstly, the BBC is obliged to be impartial, yet time and again the BBC appears to be forgetting its commitment to the people. The results of a recent Ofcom survey on the impartiality of the major news programmes show that the BBC was ranked bottom. Just 58% of those surveyed felt that BBC News was free of bias. Sky News led the way with 69%, followed by Channel 4, ITV and Channel 5. Evidence of this can be seen when Emily Maitlis, the presenter of the BBC's flagship political show Newsnight, was found guilty of using her Twitter account and social media following to promote her political views. Secondly, the BBC is also obliged to represent and provide unifying programming for all parts of the UK. But despite having various regional branches throughout the United Kingdom, everybody can see the BBC is trapped in a London bubble of its own making. In my constituency survey, 94% said that the BBC does not represent their views. Most areas of the UK who felt let down by the obstructionism of the last Parliament voted for change, turning the red wall into a blue one, heralding a move away from the views of Sadiq Khan's woke virtue-signalling metropolitan elite, so-called progressive agenda. Yet left-wing activists are routinely given platforms on news programmes where they masquerade as ordinary people. This lack of honesty and failure to represent those who live outside a 20-mile radius of new broadcasting house is a complete failure to adhere to the charter obligation to represent all parts of the UK. But worse, the BBC continually pushes the identity politics of that London bubble, shoehorning this divisive narrative into much of its programming. According to the BBC, the countryside is bigoted, and only last week skiing too was labelled racist. I ask again, why should we continue paying a licence fee, the proceeds of which will not benefit the majority of Britain when it is in breach of its own charter obligations? To conclude, Chair, the licence fee might have made sense when there were only 3 channels to choose from on the telly, but times have changed and so must the BBC. The BBC has been in breach of its charter obligations, and it would be wrong for this House to merely sweep the matter away, and I've highlighted those key concerns. The BBC has a duty to the people who it has let down, and now we must carry out our duty for the people that we represent and provide justice in scrapping the licence fee and make way for real reform.
Should Rosie not just...
Yeah, just to say, can Rosie Cooper please start? I was just standing for the chair. We've had a little bit of an incident. Thank you, Rosie.
Thank you, Tonya. Thank you, Chair. At a time when many pensioners have spent the year alone, rarely, if ever, seeing loved ones, it is deeply upsetting that some may have been placed in financial difficulty or left unable to afford one of the most basic comforts once afforded to them. The withdrawal of the TV licence for over 75s in August last year was a shameful example of the lack of compassion the government has for older people. In the midst of one of the most frightening times for the elderly, it defies logic that this callous policy was adopted. To vulnerable people that may have a degenerative condition, limited mobility and no family to keep them company, television is often an essential source of companionship. A report completed by Age UK last year suggested 6.1 million people over 60 were feeling lonely. Are we now, as we're now in the middle of our 3rd lockdown, has the government truly considered the impact this has had on people's mental health, those with dementia? The introduction of a complicated new system for TV licences, it is unmistakably cruel to force elderly people to struggle with this, and heartbreaking to think of the anxiety and distress that this will have caused. In my constituency of West Lancashire, around 5,600 people over 75 will have lost their TV licence. Many have reached out to me, contacted me, like members of the West Lancashire Pensioners Forum, to explain the situation they're in and the effect that this has had and will continue to have on their lives. So much has been said in the past year about supporting and protecting the vulnerable that it's unbelievable that I are still having to make this point. It would be an easy change that would make a huge difference in people's lives. I strongly believe that the government needs to reverse this policy immediately. I'm not campaigning to abolish the BBC. I want to see the BBC and this government treat pensioners as well as they treat their celebrities. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Rosie. And moving on to Damien Collins.
Thank you. I disagree with the petition that we should scrap the licence fee and defund the BBC, but I do agree with it on one point, and that was the decision to scrap the free licence fees for the over 75s. That promise was made to people, those licences will be there. The BBC has made the decision because it cannot afford to fund it. I think it miscalculated the amount of money that it would cost and was probably wrong to enter the agreement that it did. But nevertheless, that commitment had been made and should have been honoured. And I totally sympathise with people that have signed the petition on that basis. If we're going to call for the defunding of the BBC or the scrapping of the licence fee, then what we have to accept is the BBC will either cease to exist as we've known it or will be much, much smaller. It will have far less money. I'm not aware of any time when the BBC has sought to make cuts at scale, when members of the House of Commons have supported those cuts. On the whole, people tend to campaign for the retention of services, particularly services that are important to local communities. One of the first places where cuts to services are felt are often at local level, local news service, local radio stations, the deliveries of services which have a small but important audience. And those are all incredibly important parts of what the BBC offers. If the BBC has less revenue, it will have to decide what to do less of. The Director General has already challenged the BBC to consider what it would make if it had 80% less money than it has today. There's 80% less output. And that will lead to many services being changed dramatically across the way the BBC works. But it is in a position even today where its current model is probably not sustainable, where the revenue it gets in from the licence fee set against the rising costs of making programmes, partly as a consequence of the inflationary pressure caused by new services like Netflix and Amazon, mean the BBC will have to look very seriously at what it makes and what it can continue to afford to make. If the BBC accepted advertising, then advertising will be taken from ITV and Channel 4 to fill those gaps. Advertisers aren't suddenly going to increase their budgets by a third or more just to take up extra slots on the BBC. It would have a very big impact on ITV and Sky and on Channel 4 if that advertising money was shared around. If it becomes a subscription service, it will largely, as Netflix and Amazon do, make programmes for its subscribers, not programmes for the whole nation. The BBC is not perfect, it makes mistakes. That's why it was right that we decided that it should be regulated externally by Ofcom and not just left to mark its own homework. We can challenge it to seek to improve the breadth of services it offers and to make sure the diverse voices from across the whole United Kingdom are heard on its airwaves. We can only do that because it is publicly funded and independently regulated through Ofcom. We could not have those conversations with any other broadcaster. The BBC around the world and the World Service are a huge asset to this country. As we seek to expand Britain's global reach and influence, then we shouldn't undermine one of our great global brands, which is the BBC.
Thank you. Jill Furness.
Thank you. The BBC provides world-leading, informative, educational and entertaining programming, as well as a strong network of local news, radio and online resources. However, for many older people, television can be so much more than this. It can also be a friend. It is therefore deeply disappointing that the government have broken their long-standing commitments to over 75s to protect their free TV licence. For years, loneliness has been a key public health concern. Research from 2019 showed that 77% of those aged 75 and over felt lonely at least some of the time, including 330,000 who felt lonely always or often. Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, sadly, these figures are now inevitably higher. The television therefore provides a source of comfort for many, a companion which links people who may otherwise be isolated to the outside world. Unfortunately, responsibility for providing free TV licences fell to the BBC under the last Royal Charter. This left them with the impossible decision of either ending this vital lifeline or significantly cutting their services. This was a deliberate act by the government. They knew that transferring this responsibility without the adequate funding to support it would result in it becoming unsustainable. Under the means-tested system, millions of older people now face this extra financial burden. Linking it to pension credit does not ensure that the system works for those who need it, as this benefit does not cover every older person in financial difficulty. It also requires sometimes a lengthy administrative process. In some cases, older people have been asked to provide a photocopy or scanned image of their bank statements or pension documents in order to prove that they receive pension credit. Many lack the equipment to do this, and furthermore, it leaves older people vulnerable to fraud and identity theft. Successive Conservative governments have spoken out, claiming to be against this move. However, they are the ones that can do something about it. Social and welfare policy is a responsibility of this government, not the BBC. They could today announce they will fund universal free TV licences and lift this financial burden on our older people. The ONS has projected over a fifth of people will be aged 75 by 2030. With an ageing population, we must combat loneliness head on. I therefore urge the government to guarantee the free TV licence for everyone aged over 75. As I have said, this will not solve loneliness. However, it is a small step which will help some of the most isolated people in our society feel a sense of companionship during the lockdown and beyond.
Thank you. Gareth Bacon.
Thank you. The BBC is the world's oldest national broadcaster. Founded in 1922, it played a pivotal role during the time of this country's greatest peril in World War II. Domestically, it helped to unite the nation. Internationally, it broadcast truth and hope to a world shrouded in darkness. The licence fee was originally conceived in 1946 to fund television in the post-war years, when there was only one channel and one broadcaster. Its guiding principles to educate, entertain and inform in an impartial manner were greatly appreciated by all, and I speak as someone who previously greatly admired the BBC with its history of impartial journalism and the wide range of programmes offered. However, in 2021, times have changed markedly. With the rise of satellite and online streaming offering consumers the choice of hundreds of channels, the imposition of a compulsory tax, payment of which is punishable by imprisonment, is now rightly questioned. The decision to renege on the deal agreed with the government in 2015 to provide free TV licences to those aged over 75 has rightly been criticised. Standards at the BBC have notably slipped in the 21st century, and it has fallen a long way from its original founding principles. Too often it deviates from its requirement to operate in an impartial manner, not in a partisan political way, but certainly in a tonal and ideological way. This has been particularly acute in recent years. For example, the tone of its coverage of the Brexit process and the progress of the coronavirus pandemic have been markedly skewed. Presenters' personal opinions have been presented as facts, and the proportion of interviewees representing one side of an issue heavily outweighing those of another. Highly paid BBC employees have taken to expressing their personal political views on social media, making a nonsense of the corporation's claims to be committed to impartiality. BBC executives increasingly appear to believe that the world of Twitter represents the collective view of the real world. And in an attempt to pander to the world of social media, the BBC's output has become increasingly woke, with almost every aspect of its output, from news broadcasts to light entertainment to even costume dramas, embracing a distorted worldview. And this reached its nadir last year, when a particularly appalling decision was taken to ban the words of Land of Hope and Glory and Royal Britannia from the BBC's broadcasting of the last night of the proms, with allegations that songs had racist overtones and should not be heard. The deluge of criticism that this insult to the nation provoked soon led to a volte-face, but the fact that such a disastrous error of judgment could have been made is a remarkable indictment of the leadership of the BBC in recent years. Madam Chairman, I would much prefer the BBC to return to the impartial and trustworthy broadcaster which used to unite people. But unless the BBC once again decides to serve everyone, then I believe the time will soon come when the licence fee should be abolished to give people genuine choice.
Jamie Stone.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Obviously, I come from very far away from the M25, and certainly, to be honest, I and I think most of my constituents warmly support the BBC. There is a universality of the BBC, which means that they do everything. We have news, we have journalism, we have radio, we have podcasts, even lower league football, and of course we have drama. And who didn't love his Dark Materials? Netflix actually per head costs us more than it does the BBC. And Netflix, while very worthy, and I love The Crown, only does entertainment. So I see the BBC a bit like an NHS waiting room where you meet all sorts of people in society. And I would say, Madam Chairman, that folk from all across the political spectrum pay for the licence fee, and it doesn't matter what the views are, and we all have different political views, but the BBC is, despite what's been said, I believe, impartial. And I think that is pretty important within the context of UK media. And despite what's being said, as far as I'm aware, fake news and bias is not known. And remember that I live in a part of the UK which has very considerable political arguments on the go right now, which you'll be aware of. So I would suggest, with respect to people with different opinions to mine, that Auntie or Beeb, the BBC does keep the rest of the industry honest, and I think that's important. And personally, just to conclude my brief contribution, Madam Chair, I think if we don't back the BBC, then we're going down a very slippery slope. And we could end up with a free-for-all where bias and distortion does become all too commonplace. And all I can say is just look at some of the reporting that we've seen in other countries, which has been very, very questionable. And to come back to the point, I agree with other speakers about the licence fee for the elderly. Absolutely back what's been said, I won't repeat it. But simply this, Madam Chair, without the licence fee, the BBC will change. That is, I think we are certain of, all of us. And I believe, in my opinion, it will change for the worse. Thank you.
Thank you. Ben Bradley.
Thank you, Chair. It's safe to say this hasn't been a debate I've shied away from, and it's something that sparks a lot of interest from our constituents too. So I'm going to fly through a few things. I'm sure colleagues know I could speak about identity politics for hours, but in short, it baffles me that the BBC is spending £100 million on diversity, whilst at the same time ditching regional news in order to save 25 million. I think this is one of the clearest indicators that it's out of touch. The government's focusing on reaching out to communities across the country, but sometimes feels like the BBC have forgotten that other places exist outside of London, places that are actually different. And I don't think that the programming represents the full range of thoughts and values that are out there. In spending this 100 million on diversity of physical characteristics, they seemingly have no plan to combat the lack of diversity of experience, of geography, and diversity of thought. We know that our state institutions can suffer from this. Being based in London inevitably leads to recruiting a middle-class metropolitan demographic, but as far as I can see, this still isn't a priority for the BBC. I struggle to see how they can represent working-class towns like Mansfield and Warsop if it scraps regional teams and runs the whole thing from London. And given the choice between that diversity budget or regional news, I think the vast majority would take the latter. I honestly don't think, contrary to what some say, they are deliberately biased in their content. I just think they have a tunnel vision based on a lack of genuine diversity of experience and background in their teams, because they follow the wrong priorities on things like recruitment. I also think, frankly, it's impossible to maintain the veil of impartiality in the 21st century in a Twitter world where news is so instant and constant that perhaps we should just stop trying to pretend that it can be done. The license fee model isn't sustainable in the long term, and with the rise of new technology, it's outdated. It made sense back in the day when there were 3 or 4 channels and government subsidy was vital, but nowadays there is no need for taxpayer-funded media. We're spoiled for choice with a myriad of services to choose from. People should have the choice whether to pay and watch BBC content rather than being criminalised. And on that point, the impact of criminalising the fee on our courts is massive. Data last year showed that 1/3 of all women's criminal convictions are for evading the licence fee. Why are we clogging up our courts with issues like this instead of putting time and money into seeking justice for those against those who pose a threat to our society? I could talk about presented salaries or fees for the over 75s if I had time. Whilst my speech probably hasn't reflected this, I do want to see the BBC succeed, and I'm hopeful that it can correct many of the problems it's created for itself. I think the best way to help it do that is to set it free, to make it compete in the market and effectively force it to deliver what the market wants rather than what the BBC wants. They create some absolutely fantastic content. I was hooked on Peaky Blinders. I bought the Grandad collar shirts. It took all of my strength not to buy a flat cap. That kind of programming will sell. It will compete on the market and make money. And in a post-license fee world, the BBC can seek an audience and income from the whole world, not just from UK taxpayers. That will make it leaner and fitter and make it better. And in my view, the sooner that happens, the better. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Tahir Ali.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through the course of the pandemic, the value of having a trusted news source has been underlined in a dramatic fashion. We are fortunate that we have the BBC, an institution which has continued to provide information, education, and entertainment to us all through this difficult time. So much so that the BBC have even decided to put lessons on for the children at home. So more and more people are tuning into the BBC News and other channels for education purposes and leisure and as a friend to keep us up to date with the rapidly changing series of events, including COVID-19 that has been brought with the pandemic. Therefore, I think at a time such as this, it is important to defend the social value of a public broadcaster, which is universally available to the public. That is why I believe it is essential that we continue to fund the BBC. Is that, by the way of a TV licence, is a debate to be had. The BBC creates and sustains thousands of jobs and supports independent media producers and suppliers across the country. Therefore, we should view the BBC as an asset that deserves investment and that should continue to receive direct support from government. Now, the relentless round of cuts by the government have left the BBC in a more precarious position than ever. There have been thousands of jobs lost in the BBC, which has threatened its ability to sustain the diversity, breadth and depth of its coverage. That is why we desperately need significant investment into our public broadcaster, not more privatisation and cuts. We've only got to look at other countries abroad where broadcasting companies are backed by filthy rich capitalists, and then the agenda that is driven and the rubbish that is broadcast through some of the channels which are privately funded. So my plea is that we need to protect jobs, not lose more of them. And I must restate my position to my preference to a fully funded, fully public BBC that is universally available to all. And I must state my opposition to abandon the TV licence without having a proper debate on how alternative funding can be made available. Now, my final point, Madam Chair, is that we need to look at the free TV for the over 75s, but maybe bring the age limit down to 70. Thank you.
Thank you. Brendan Clark-Smith.
Thank you, Chair. British television is admired around the world, and it's something we can quite rightly be proud of. And having grown up in a diet of bread and porridge, I've always enjoyed some of the excellent comedies, drama, nature programmes produced not only by the BBC, but also many of the private providers. And I still regularly follow the progress of my beloved Notts County on BBC Radio Nottingham. And I'm not here today to bash the BBC. And we've all heard the arguments about wokeness and bias, especially related to Brexit, but that's not why I'm speaking here today. COVID's plunged many of our constituents into financial difficulties, but paying for a TV licence is something that many of the poorest in society have always struggled to pay. And there have been improvements over the years, such as the ability to spread payments, but the cost is still a challenge for many, however small the increase. And it's fundamentally wrong that many of my constituents over the age of 75 have had their free TV licenses taken away from them. We all know that tough decisions need to be made, but this predates COVID, and I believe the BBC has lost a lot of public support. And this brings us on to the problem of those who cannot afford to pay and are subsequently convicted. And women are almost 10 times more likely to be convicted for not paying their TV licence than men. Some 74% of 114,000 convictions for licence fee dodging in 2019 were for women. And only 1% of almost 4,000 women in prison are there for violent offences. Now, some 72% of all prosecutions for TV licenses were against women in 2018. And in 2017, the offence constituted 30% of all prosecutions against women, meaning it was the most common offence women were prosecuted for. And I polled my Bassett Law constituents recently, and 78% said they felt the licence fee was not good value for money. Half wanted to move to a subscription service, and a whopping 87% felt that those over 75 should receive free TV licences. Not only would I like to see the licence fee decriminalised, but I would also like to see a move towards a subscription-based model such as Netflix. There's also another option I think needs to be explored, and I mentioned earlier that British television is in many cases the envy of the world, and there have been numerous commercial opportunities created through this, and the BBC has shown that it can use these to its advantage. And the World Service and the BBC's online content already makes revenue from advertising. And this allows them to offset this against the cost of the television license fee. And perhaps it's time that we actually see some market forces, and it's time for this option to be exploited domestically. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Alan Dorrans. Oh, Alan, you need to unmute.
Apologies, Chair, I had gone off mute. Thank you, Chair. Part of the stated mission of the BBC is to act in the public interest, serving all audiences through the provision of impartial services. The BBC does not achieve that aim, and the mandated BBC TV licence is no longer fair to significant sections of this country. I will focus on just two issues: the evidence that the BBC does not meet the needs of the young, and the decline of key audiences, including those in Scotland. The Ofcom annual report in 2020 states, time spent with the BBC by 16 to 34-year-olds now stands at less than an hour a day, down 22% since 2017. Only 39% of 16 to 19-year-olds ever watch the BBC, even for a few minutes, and that is down from 61% since 2015. Ofcom explains this trend by commenting, audiences now have access to a much wider breadth of alternative high-quality content, which is inevitably attracting audiences away from the BBC. This is increasingly being seen across all age groups, but particularly younger audiences. Ofcom research also suggests that the BBC reach is in decline, and at a faster rate for some, including minority ethnic audiences, those aged under 35, those in lower socio-economic groups, and audience in Scotland. This clearly illustrates that BBC are no longer meeting the needs or interests of significant sections of the population. Whilst there are more than one reason for Scottish viewing figures and TV licensing subscriptions dropping significantly, political bias, sometimes blatant but often subtle, against Scottish independence in BBC's news coverage is a major factor. An obvious example of this is the aggressive questioning of SNP politicians during interviews, where their political opponents enjoy an easy ride. As recently as last Friday, the BBC Scotland editor, Sarah Smith, reported the former First Minister Alex Salmond claimed Nicholas Sturgeon had broken the ministerial code and that he thinks she should resign. This was totally untrue. Alex Salmond did not say those words. Other than deliberately spreading misinformation, what other explanation can there be other than blatant political bias on the part of the BBC? In conclusion, Chair, the BBC does not serve the needs of the diverse peoples of the United Kingdom sufficiently to justify a mandatory licence fee, far less one backed up by the threat of prosecution, a fine, or even imprisonment. All this, and now charging the majority of over 75s for a TV licence, is totally outrageous and unacceptable. The TV licence fee must go, and the BBC must be replaced by an organisation which is impartial and serves all audiences within the United Kingdom.
Thank you. Thank you. Virginia Crosby.
Thank you, Chair. The licence fee as part of the Royal Charter will not be reviewed in 2027. In the last consultation in 2016, 60% of respondents felt the licence fee model did not need to be changed. However, whilst the licence fee per se is not up for debate at this time, there are matters intrinsic to this petition that it is right to debate. The petition makes reference to the licence fee being seen as an unfair tax on those on low income, with the penalty for non-payment being prosecution and possible jail. The licence fee funds the BBC to offer a wide range of media to a broader audience, and in Wales, it also supports Welsh language resources like S4C and Radio Cymru. In the past few months of isolating and shielding, the BBC has been a lifeline for many, but particularly for the elderly, many of whom, in my constituency of Ynys Môn, are first language Welsh. In rural communities like Ynys Môn, many elderly people will have barely seen anyone in the flesh for the past 12 months. So alongside excellent community radio stations like Mon FM, the BBC has been a friend and companion through this lonely time. Last year, the BBC scrapped the free TV licence for over 75s to all but those on pension credit. That meant around 4 million people had to find an extra £157 at a time when they were more dependent on television and radio than at any other time in recent years. When the BBC announced it was scrapping free licences for the over 75s, I received letters and emails from many constituents, angry, frustrated, and disappointed at the change. Our over 75s have been the backbone of this country. They've lived through war, depression, recession, and now a pandemic. It is their hard work and their hard-earned taxes that have made the UK the strong country that it is today. And I believe that they deserve to be able to watch television without having to pay for the privilege. Thank you.
Gregory Campbell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The BBC used to be known across the globe with its fearless reputation for impartiality, but sadly no longer. For many years now, there has been many cases, and I'm not going to go over, some of them have been alluded to by previous members, of partisanship, of lack of professionalism. But I would love to be a champion for an independent, non-partisan public service broadcaster, but we have to get one first. In recent years, the BBC's reputation has been vastly diminished. It is viewed in many ways as being partisan. There's another aspect that hasn't really been touched upon, Madam Chair, in the debate thus far. There has, up until fairly recently, been an extreme reluctance for openness and transparency at the BBC regarding the publication of on-screen talent salaries. That went on for many years. The BBC argued that this would lead to a loss of talent going to commercial channels. Eventually, they were dragged kicking and screaming to release bandings for salaries, and there was no massive loss of talent. But what continues to this day, Madam Chair, is that some on-screen talent have their own private companies who can then bid for contracts for programmes to be broadcast on the BBC, leading to an imbalance and less opportunities for the independent media sector to compete on a level playing field. So that needs to be brought out into the open to see what element of advantage, if any, is given to BBC broadcasters holding their own companies and being able to bid for and get contracts that others are unable to get. I posed a series of questions to the head of BBC Northern Ireland, couldn't get answers, had to come to London, to the BBC there to try and get answers, ended up going to the audit office in London to try and get answers to very comprehensive, fundamental questions about funding of the BBC. There's foot dragging and it has to end. Some presenters appear to have learned their questioning trade from a Greek philosopher called Maximus Interruptus. There needs to be a change. There needs to be a radical change in how the BBC is funded. It is quite obvious to everyone that the licence fee has outlived its usefulness. It may have been fine in the 60s, 70s and 80s, but in the past 10 or 15 years, funding models have changed. So must the BBC. Thank you.
Thank you. Simon Jupp.
Thank you, Chair. The BBC is still the best broadcaster in the world. It's one of Great Britain's finest exports. Planet Earth and many documentaries about the wonders of the world have wowed audiences, making us reflect on the environmental challenges we face. Panorama's groundbreaking journalism lifted the lid on abuse in care homes, corruption at FIFA, and went undercover to reveal real life in North Korea. We've laughed whilst watching Yes Minister, cheered during Match of the Day, and cringed at the office. Every single day, BBC Parliament provides unrivaled coverage of democracy in action. Meanwhile, the World Service educates and informs millions of people every day, contributing to our nation's standing across the world. Closer to home, the BBC produces local daily news bulletins. These command huge audiences every night and a loyal listenership to BBC local radio stations, serving communities from Devon to Dundee. Since January, the BBC has helped children unable to attend school because of the pandemic and helped them keep up with their studies by broadcasting lessons on BBC Two, CBBC and online. I was proud to work for the BBC for nearly 7 years as a presenter, producer and TV reporter, and I saw the difference that good journalism can make and where there's room for improvement. Many people, both left and right, accuse the BBC of being biased. I agree, but it's a metropolitan bias, strengthened by centralisation in London, the fact that most newsrooms and therefore journalists are based in urban areas and that most of them went to university. The BBC needs to embrace remote working, harnessing technology to ensure journalists live the life of their audiences. Editors in London should use talent based in the nations and regions rather than sending national reporters across the country. Much is said about the BBC's focus on diversity. It's important to have a wide range of backgrounds represented at every level of the corporation. Diversity of thought among staff will be key to reconnect with audiences who've signed a petition to revoke the licence fee. Clearly, as is obvious, I don't support such a move. However, I do believe the licence fee should be free for those over 75 and reform of the fee is necessary. Revoking the licence fee would place a financial tourniquet around the neck of the BBC, resulting in many thousands of skilled jobs being lost across our country, weakening our nation's journalism and our cultural offer here and around the world. Much has been said about cancel culture in recent months. Let's not push that agenda any further by cancelling a big part of our country's culture.
Thank you. Jeff Smith.
Thank you, Chair. Normally I'd only attend a petition debate if lots of my constituents had signed one. I'm pleased to say only 87 of my constituents signed this particular petition, less than 1 in 1,000. So I might not normally attend, but actually maybe it's right that the 999 out of 1,000 constituents who didn't sign are represented by some remarks in opposition to this petition. 10 TV services, 10 national radio stations, 40 local radio stations, plus everything on offer from iPlayer, BBC Sounds and the BBC website, all for just over £3 a week, less than the price of a pint. The licence fee might just be the best bargain in Britain today. And for every £1 spent by the BBC, it generates £2 for the wider UK economy. But it's not just about value for money, it's about the part it plays in our national life. And not just because 9 out of 10 people use the BBC services every week. It's a question of what kind of country do we want to be? Do we want universal, high-quality public service broadcasting? Because that's what the licence fee exists to support. And universality is an essential part of public service broadcasting. And in a world of Fox News and fake news, surely public service broadcasting has never been more important, especially in the current crisis, when dangerous fake news about coronavirus and vaccines has only emphasised that the universal availability of accurate, impartial news and trusted information is more important than ever. And the BBC is the most trusted and popular source of news in the UK. 83% of people trust the BBC's TV news. And 80% of the public turned to the BBC for information at the start of the pandemic. And it's also about our place in the world, about the country's soft power, and the fact that the BBC is the world's most trusted news source. Now, as we've heard demonstrated today, impartiality is in the eye of the beholder. When both sides of an argument think it's biased, they're probably doing okay. People in this country and abroad trust the BBC, and yes, it is not perfect. The BBC makes mistakes, they get judgments wrong, but if they get it wrong, they're called out for it, and they learn lessons and apologise if necessary. And rather those mistakes than the deliberate misinformation and bias that we see on broadcast networks in the US. And let's imagine a BBC funded by subscription, making programmes aimed at subscribers, not for every UK citizen, or going increasingly for lowest common denominator content has to appeal to advertisers. And more expensive, just compare the price of subscription channels. So older and poorer people who rely on the BBC now possibly unable to afford a subscription. I've said before in Parliament, there are 6 letters that make me proud of this country: NHS, BBC. I pay for one through my tax and national insurance. I pay for the other through my licence fee. And between them, it's the best money I spend. Thank you.
Hugh Merriman.
Chair, thank you very much indeed for giving me the opportunity to speak in this debate. I chair the all-party parliamentary group for the BBC. And in that role, I think it's important to make sure that we both support and encourage the BBC, but also bring up matters of debate where the BBC can do better. I think it's important that we have this debate and indeed have differences of opinion. In the time I've got, though, I just wanted to perhaps correct a few things that have been said. For the record, we've talked a lot here about misrepresentation, so I hope it will be okay just to bring a few facts to the fore. Firstly, with regard to the over 75s provision, it's not the case that the BBC was funded for this or that it promised to continue it. It was a decision given by my government of the time that it was down to the BBC to decide if it wished to fund it or not. The cost of this would be £750 million. The BBC was in fact given just over £100 million with an increase in the licence fee in the usual course. And in fact, the decision the BBC made to fund the over 75 licence fee for those in receipt of pension credit is costing it £250 million. So it's already putting more money in to over 75s than was the case previously when the government was doing this. So it's just not right to say, A, the BBC promised to fund this, and B, it's been funded. It's not the case at all. And I know the Minister will bear that out because I shared a speech with him on the benches when we talked about what really happened at that time. Secondly, in terms of the decision to ensure that the licence fee is still a criminalised matter, despite all that's said about convictions and court process, there was a written parliamentary question that revealed not one person is currently sitting in a jail because they have not paid the TV licence fee. If people do end up in court or indeed in jail, then it's because there tends to be a large series of unpaid fines from courts that have looked at bills not being paid as a whole. And I think it's really important to note that. Equally, before over 75s were given the licence fee for free, there were no prosecutions of over 75s beforehand either. So we shouldn't feel that there will be either. Again, I think those are important points to make. And just finally, I think when it comes to value for money, it costs 43p per day to get hold of the BBC. It is a public service, and the essential ingredients of a public service is that it's universal. It's affordable. It would be probably about 3 times the price if we looked at all the subscription channels that give the same content the BBC gives. And the reality is, it doesn't matter what kind of survey I put on my website. If I'm a Conservative MP, I know people will comment because they are likely to be Conservative sympathisers. We know that the licence fee remains the most popular means to fund the BBC above subscription and above advertising. So I just hope, Chair, that those are a few matters to throw into the pot.
Thank you. Chris Bryant. You're muted, Chris.
Thank you very much, Chair. First rule of this new world. I think that the UK has the best broadcasting mix in the world, and we'd be absolutely daft to cut it to pieces. And at the very heart of it is the BBC funded by the licence fee. It means there's a competition for quality in this country between all the different broadcasters. And yes, of course, there's a debate about what impartiality looks like. I get deeply frustrated when they put on, they have one person for one side of the argument, another person from the other side of the argument, when the other side of the argument has absolutely no factual base. For instance, over climate change. Yes, of course, there's going to be that debate, but there's a debate about equality in broadcasting in this country in a way that there isn't in so many other countries. Because of the licence fee, the BBC has to provide something for everybody. And that means my constituents in the Rhondda, not just the really high value people that the broadcasting marketeers want to chase, such as through Netflix. I want to say to Conservatives who think that all of this should be handed over to the market, man was not made for the market. The market was made for man and woman. You cannot simply hand over every single thing to the marketplace because it doesn't provide equally for everybody. Some people get overserved because they're wealthy and they might buy other products through advertising. I get furious when I hear Conservative MPs attack the BBC for its decision on the over 75s. It was a cowardly decision by the Conservative government to force the BBC to negotiate at the end of a shotgun and to hand over social policy to the British Broadcasting Corporation. If the Conservative government wanted to end free TV licenses for the over 75s, they should have had the courage to say so themselves and do it. But they didn't. They were cowardly and they decided to go through the back door. I get furious about this pretend debate about wokery. I have no idea what that means. It's a fib. It's a lie. At the very heart of it is a fundamental attempt to cast everybody else as in the wrong. I remember it in the 1990s. It was when we were all attacked for being loony lefties, just because we thought that gay people should be treated equally with the rest. Now, I would just say to anybody on this woke argument, if you really don't think that people should be treated equally or are equal, regardless of their race, their creed, their colour or their sexuality, just say so. Don't pretend it's anything to do with the BBC.
Mark Eastwood.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to start off by confessing that I quite like some of the programming on BBC. Now Leeds United are in the Premier League, watching Match of the Day is enjoyable, albeit only when Leeds win. I couldn't stomach watching Manchester United put 6 past us. Dara O'Brien is one of the funniest stand-up comics I've seen live, and Mock the Week is hilarious at times. Drama series The Serpent was a tour de force, gripping, tense and improbable, except for the fact it was based on a true story. I received quite a few emails about the BBC from my constituents, mainly from people who think its coverage is biased against the government. But is the BBC biased? Certainly its coverage during the Brexit debate was questionable, and it could easily be argued that its broadcasts favoured Remain. However, go on Twitter, and there are many on both sides of the political divide who claim it is biased against them. This may suggest that it's not that biased after all. It has been said that the BBC is a national treasure and should be protected. But regardless of whether we think the BBC broadcasts quality programming or that its output is biased, we appear to be missing an important point, and it's all about choice. We live in a modern age where we have the ability to choose from a multitude of channels on subscription. We all have a choice if we want to pay for these channels. With the BBC, we don't get the choice and are forced to pay for the TV licence, regardless of whether we watch it or not. I could understand paying towards a state broadcaster if we only had 3 channels to choose from, as we did back in the day, and I'm showing my age now. But in the new era of broadcasting and subscription services, the requirement to have to pay for a licence is becoming ever more obsolete. It is a national disgrace that anyone could be subject to proceedings if they don't. In 2019, there were around 115,000 convictions for non-payment of the licence fee. Nearly 74% of them were women, often single mothers struggling to pay the bills. And now the over 75s run the risk of prosecution. Non-payment of the fine even carries the risk of imprisonment. It is absurd that we clog our courts and make criminals out of people daring to watch television without a licence. In 2015, these cases accounted for 10% of total prosecutions. If the BBC is truly a national treasure, then surely it would thrive as a subscription channel or financed itself through commercial advertising. I may even subscribe to it myself, but that would be my choice. In summary, I fully support this petition to revoke the TV licence, and I would urge the government to consider a phased scrapping of the licence fee and give the people of this country the choice they deserve. Thank you.
Ian Paisley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Last year, the BBC got £3.5 billion from its fees. That equates to 71% of its total funding. It made a further £142 billion from its commercial activities. 110, almost 111,000 people signed this petition to revoke the TV licence. I'd say that they signed up to 3 things: that it's not value for money, that people face criminalisation if they dare to oppose and not pay their TV licence, and they object to the opinionated news versus factual news. And of course, we've heard some of the arguments today of those who are fearful of change about the BBC, who fear reform of the BBC and are sycophantic about the BBC. In 2019, 114,000 people were criminalised in the UK. No, they didn't go to jail, but they were criminalised for non-payment of their licence fee. 74% of those people happened to be women from poor families. In 2018, the most common offence women were charged with in our courts was the non-payment of the BBC television licence fee. The pension credit argument, the opt-out for over the 75s is of course a complete and total joke. In my constituency, 1,300 people over 75 no longer get the free TV licence because they don't have pension credit. So they're now punished with a almost £160 fine, essentially, for watching the BBC. That is wrong. I agree with Lord Botham when he said last week that over 75 should not be prosecuted for the non-payment of this fee. In terms of the value for money argument, my constituent wrote to me this week and she objected to the annual licence fee because in her words, she was paying for the vast majority of entertainment programmes are repeats and repeats of repeats, and that the average BBC day comprises of repeats, trailers, fillers, recaps, padded out with news and weather. For 2 years, my constituent has written to the BBC and has never once received a response from them. Yet she's a paying customer. How can that be right? In the same letter I quote from, this 89-year-old constituent is denied a free TV licence. Another constituent asked the BBC why so many repeats are actually put in place, and she was patronised with the answer of, "These viewers appreciate and enjoy timeless classics." That's simply not good enough. When asked for figures about these repeats, we're told that this material is commercially sensitive. One constituent told me that she's sick of watching Dad's Army repeats. She's seen so many Dad's Army repeats that the royalties now must be meaningless because most of the talent is no longer there. No, the BBC has got to change. It's got to move away from its opinionated news to factual news. I don't need a reporter to tell me what the news means. I just need to see the news.
Tonya Antoniazzi.
Thank you, Chair, for fitting me in. I very much appreciate it, and happy St David's Day from Gower. I don't support this petition and many of the views of the government front bench, not from the government benches, and I think the COVID pandemic has really shown how many people from so many walks of life have depended on the BBC's invaluable service. It's shone a light on the cost of keeping up with a myriad of pay-to-view services. We've spoken about Netflix, Disney Plus, which as a single parent, I have to say, are frankly excessive and put a strain on family budgets, especially now. And so many of my over 75 constituents in Gower were extremely upset about losing their free access to the BBC licence. Now, I'm rather shocked by the views of the Honourable Member for Stoke-on-Trent North, who has singled out individuals at the BBC, such as Gary Lineker and Emily Maitlis in this debate, which I think is frankly embarrassing and unbecoming of his position. To call the BBC woke and accuse it of extreme political bias from a position of right-wing extremism is rather like Donald Trump throwing his dummy out of his pram, and it is not fit for British politics. The last 12 months have shown how important public service broadcasting is to audiences, the length and breadth of Wales. Audiences to BBC Wales today have risen almost 30% year on year, and BBC Wales's wide range of factual and drama programming has seen a growth of over 13%. DIY SOS is also a jewel in the crown. It touches the heart of so many communities across the United Kingdom, and I was particularly proud to see the only COVID programme be filmed in my constituency for surfability in Caswell Bay. Now, the BBC online services are excellent. We've seen this particularly with the online teaching resources and the coronavirus-related content, the archive of sport during a period when no live sport could take place, true crime and old favourites such as Weatherman Walking and Yola Williams have provided a varied schedule which has resonated with their audiences. But Welsh rugby is also a national treasure, cherished by all, and we don't want to see it behind a paywall, because on Saturday, when Wales famously beat England for the Six Nations Triple Crown, 1.3 million people tuned in, and that is the most watched programme on any channel in Wales so far this year. And in response to the Right Honourable Member for North Antrim, if you look at the BBC annual reports and accounts, there are page after page of commitments and reporting on original first-run UK programming. For example, on BBC One in 2019-20, there were over 4,000 hours of first-run originals. And that, Chair, is what we need to keep on reminding ourselves. The BBC is fit for purpose and it is valued by many.
Thank you. We now go to the SNP frontbench spokesperson, John Nichols.
Thank you very much indeed. The petition we debate today calls for the end of the licence fee, as according to the proposers, people no longer watch the BBC, preferring to watch other media sources. It's true, people now access a range of sources. It's called choice. There are on average 5 million people using a BBC service at any one time. For the daily price of a pint of milk, 91% of the population use the BBC at least once a week. That gives them access to an important news source, but also a breadth of other content. Now, we often hear that young people aren't interested in the service, and yet 12.5 million folk under the age of 35 use the BBC at least once a week, and a peak of 6 million children logged on to BBC Bite Size in a single month this year. So we can knock on the head the idea that no one is watching. Is the BBC perfect? Well, obviously not. In Scotland, there's a substantial gulf between what we raise through the licence fee and what the BBC spends. That must end. Scotland is hungry for programming investment, not just news, but cutting-edge drama, radio, educational programming, natural history and Gaelic. During the COVID pandemic, the BBC has demonstrated how important it is in times of crisis. BBC News has helped stem a tide of disinformation about vaccines. Its entertainment programmes have provided company for so many, especially the elderly, the very same pensioners who now have licence fee bills dropping through their letterboxes. Now, some of the speakers in this debate are trying to rewrite history. It should not be the BBC's responsibility to offer free TV licences. That was and should be a government social provision. The government was warned at the time that imposing this responsibility on the BBC would result in hardship for pensioners and huge job losses at the corporation. And alas, it was only because of the BBC's spinelessness at the time under Lord Hall that they succumbed to the government and that this mess now exists. I would urge the government, even at this late stage, to re-engage with the BBC and take responsibility for pensioners. So is there an alternative to the licence fee? I'd argue it's good value. It's a lot cheaper than its commercial rivals, Sky and Virgin, and it provides good value for the economy at large, providing a return of £2 in jobs, economic opportunities and expenditure for every pound spent. For years, alternatives to the licence fee have been debated, but no better alternative found. And I can't help but notice that many of those members supporting this motion span a wide range of pro-Brexit opinion from extreme to howling. What they seem to hate is diversity and questioning journalism. What they lament is a lost imagined world of the 1970s where Morecambe and Wise shared a bed without titters and Mary Whitehouse supervised. So to those on my side of the political fence and constitutional argument in Scotland, be careful what you wish for. For the moment at least, the licence fee has to remain. Thank you.
Thank you. And now to the Labour frontbench spokesperson, Chris Matheson.
Thank you. And can I also thank everyone who has taken part in this petition and indeed all the petitions that we're considering today. Even without many of us realising that the BBC is woven into our daily lives. As the Honourable, my good friend who's just spoken, the Honourable Member from the SNP, referred, 91% of adults and 80% of young people are tuning in to the BBC each week, right across its portfolio of services, 40 local radio stations, news, world service and bite size. It's a unique part of our social and community story about who we are. How many reference points from our past are defined by what we saw on TV together as a nation, from Trumpton and Mr. Ben through to the Tweenies and the Teletubbies, from Michael Parkinson to Graham Norton, Play for Today to Line of Duty. These are national TV moments that shape us and unite us. The NHS waiting room, as the Honourable Member for Caithness and Sutherland said. And crucially for the licence fee debate, the BBC should not be expected to make every programme appeal to everyone. Universality is about ensuring that there is something for everyone across its total radio, television and online output. As honourable members have said, during the pandemic, the BBC has been of huge value as a provider of trusted national and local news coverage. My honourable friend from Manchester Whittingdale mentioned this. Every metric demonstrates this trust, as do the viewing figures and page impressions online, and also the education programming. The BBC is also vital to the wider broadcasting and cultural sector, giving evidence recently to the DCMS Select Committee. Anne Mensah and Benjamin King of Netflix both commented on the importance of the BBC to the wider creative ecosystem. They highlighted that one of the main reasons they chose to make their home in the UK was because of the work of the BBC and the impact it's had in building the profile of the UK creatively, bringing through young talent, investment in production. The licence fee underpins universality and is critical foundation investment in the UK's creative economy, ensuring sustained investment. 1.4 billion by the BBC in TV content production in the UK, and for every £1 spent on the BBC through the licence fee, it in turn produces £2 value through jobs, economic opportunities and expenditure. With the BBC's rich contribution to the music, arts and theatre, many jobs in these fields are reliant on its success. The creative sector has been one of the hardest hit during the pandemic, and any cuts or further financial strain on the BBC will have a significant impact on people reliant on jobs in these fields. The BBC is able to take risks because of its funding mechanism. There was a furore last year over the frankly stupid decision, as been referred to, cut out bits of Last Night of the Proms. But let's be clear, with a commercially funded BBC, the Last Night of the Proms will become the only night of the Proms. Only with the current funding could we have the whole season of Henry Wood concerts that is such an important part of our cultural year. And only with the current funding can we have the network of 40 genuine local radio stations. Turning, if I can, to the over 75s, despite the clear importance of the BBC and their contribution to the creative sector and the economy, it has faced many years of Tory attacks, threats and funding cuts, which are all designed to undermine the corporation's independence. The BBC is having to deal with significant financial burdens as a result of the broken manifesto promise of the Conservative government. They dumped the cost of the over 75s licence fee on the BBC, and in doing so betrayed millions of pensioners. The government made the BBC an offer it couldn't refuse, as my honourable friend Veronda said. Take on the cost of the over 75s licence fee or face even greater slashing of their funding and consideration of the removal of licence fee altogether. And it's this government who now refuse to accept responsibility for their broken promises and instead dump the blame on the BBC for every cut in service or job redundancy that they're having to make as a direct result of the government's policy. In this licence period alone, that's £800 million in funding, in addition to the £125 million deficit that has arisen during the COVID-19 pandemic. And the bill for the over 75s eligible for a pension credit will cost the BBC around £250 million. The decision to abolish the free TV licence for the over 75s has had a real impact on significant numbers of isolated and disadvantaged older people on low and modest incomes. And Age UK has spoken about the effect of the policy on increased loneliness and isolation, as did my honourable friend from Brightside and Hillsborough. We welcome the fact that the BBC has abandoned for now its absurd plans to decriminalise non-payment of the licence fee, another one of the petition subjects covered in this debate. This would be another mechanism for removing funding from the BBC, but the consequence would be civil debt collectors knocking at the door of non-payers, and that will be just as undesirable. When it comes to the licence fee, it may not be a perfect system. However, it is arguably the best of the options, and the independent review on TV licence enforcement, the Perry report, suggested this, as did others before it. Having said that, a subscription-funded BBC would look entirely different to today's BBC. They would have to make programmes aimed just at subscribers, not for the whole of the UK, and people would end up paying more, as has already been said, pricing some people out. It would cost the BBC more to operate a subscription service, taking money out of content investment. The BBC is able to speak to the whole of the UK through national programming in its network of local TV and radio stations. And at a time when the union is under threat, this is crucial. Furthermore, funding the BBC through advertising will draw money away from commercial broadcasters and content investment. This will be bad news for other broadcasters who will face new competition for already dwindling advertising revenues at a time when we're introducing restrictions on advertising food products and considering restrictions on gambling advertising. The point was made by the Honourable Member for Folkestone. The delicate balance in the broadcasting ecosystem, because each part has a distinctive funding base: TV licence fee, advertising, subscription. Given the wide range of services that the BBC provides, the price of the licence fee is still good value. If one was to purchase the range of media offered through the licence fee, then a bundle of subscriptions providing advertising-free, high-quality services comparable with those delivered by the BBC across video, audio and news would cost £453.45 per year. This is in comparison with the current licence fee of £157.50, just 43 pence per day, as the Honourable Member for Bexhill and Battle said. So instead of bashing the BBC and trying to undermine its independence for political gain, the government should start to champion it as a beacon of British excellence in broadcasting and journalism, as a trusted source of information in an age of fake news and disinformation, a powerhouse behind our world-leading creative industries and the most trusted form of British soft power overseas. We've all got our examples of times when we've been unhappy with BBC News coverage, and for every one of the Honourable Member from the DUP or from the SNP or from the Conservative Party who can point to allegations and times of political bias, I can meet those allegations and raise them from clates that the Labour Party has made. But the truth is, the BBC's success, its role in our society and the role it gives us in the world is only possible because of the unique funding method that is the TV licence fee. Let's not undermine that just because we didn't like a particular news story or an individual programme. Thank you.
Thank you. I now call the Minister for Media and Data to respond to the debate, and I'll be going just briefly before 6 o'clock back to the Jonathan Gullis, who opened the petition, for final comment. So you have until shortly before 6, Minister.
Thank you. And can I first of all thank the committee for calling this debate, and indeed the petitioners for raising what is, as I think the debate has demonstrated, a subject which produces extremely strong views on both sides of the argument. I, having previously chaired a select committee into inquiry into the future of the licensee, then had responsibility as Secretary of State for the last licence fee settlement and the renewal of the Charter. So it's an argument I've been involved in for some considerable time, and so I know how strongly many people feel. We should first of all recognise, as I think my honourable friend for Innismon pointed out, that the licence fee isn't just to fund the BBC. It also funds S4C, and we've used some of the money from the licence fee also to try and fill in the gaps not filled by public service broadcasters through things like the Young Audience Content Fund and the Audio Content Fund. But obviously the majority of the money, overwhelming majority, does go to support the BBC. And it is right to recognise, firstly, the huge asset that the BBC is to this country. It is widely admired around the world, and particularly in the course of the last year, when I suspect most of us have watched more television than we have done for a very long time. It has filled that gap by providing, not just, as several speakers have pointed out, reliable source of information against the fake news and misinformation that has been circulating. It has also provided education for the many children who have been unable to attend school by giving over a large part of its daytime children's programming to educational content and some great TV content. I recognise the remarks of my honourable friend from North Antrim, because I had received the email from his constituent as well, complaining about the amount of repeats. To some extent, that is because of the difficulty it has been to make original content during a pandemic. And I think all broadcasters have struggled slightly, although they have been ingenious in finding ways around it. But the BBC have still produced some terrific dramas, like The Serpent has been mentioned by my honourable friend for Dewsbury. We're looking forward to the next series of Line of Duty in just a few weeks' time. But having said that, the BBC is open to criticism, and there are areas where clearly reform is needed. And I welcome the fact that the Director General has already made clear that impartiality is absolutely paramount for the BBC and has acted to stop news presenters from expressing opinions on social media. He's made it clear that some of the salary levels are excessive, and also has tackled some of the more ludicrous examples of what my honourable friends described as the woke agenda, by, for instance, reinstating Rule Britannia at last night of the proms. And in particular, I know that he recognises the concern that the BBC has exhibited an unduly metropolitan bias. And I very much agree with those, particularly my honourable friend from Mansfield, who reinforced the importance of regional news coverage and making sure that the BBC represents opinions from right across the country, not just in the metropolitan heartlands. Now, during the course of the debate, there have been a couple of specific issues raised, which I just want to touch on. The first is decriminalisation. The government does recognise that many people feel it is disproportionate that this particular charge should be enforced through criminal sanction. And we are concerned at those who do believe that is unfair, and therefore, as a result, we did look carefully at the issue of whether or not to decriminalise. But actually, as the opposition spokesman, the Honourable Member for Chester, pointed out, you have to look at what the alternative would be. And if we move to a civil enforcement, it could actually lead to licence fee payers facing possibly greater costs and bailiffs turning up on the door if they fail to pay. And therefore, we think it does need to be examined further. We recognise the strength of feeling that decriminalisation should take place, but before moving down that road, we need to be very clear about what the consequences would be and what possible alternatives there are. And so we continue to consider that. Now, quite a number of speakers in the debate have raised the issue of the over 75s. It is the case that the agreement was reached with the BBC that various measures to be taken, which they would ask for, the raise of the licence fee in line with RPI and the close of the so-called iPlayer loophole, and in return they agreed to take on responsibility for the over 75s. And the government remains disappointed that they decided not to continue with the full exemption and instead restricted it to those on pension credit. But I've only got a few minutes left, and I wanted to touch on the absolute core of the debate, which is the future of the licence fee. As has been pointed out, it is set until the end of this charter. The licence fee model will continue until 2027. The level of the licence fee has risen in line with inflation each year since the last settlement, and we are now in the process of discussing with the BBC the next settlement, which will cover the next 5 years, and that is an ongoing discussion. Secretary of State has made plain that he wants the BBC to justify the amount of money that they receive against the public purposes of the BBC, but that is a matter which will be decided within the next few months. But in the longer term, I do think that the BBC has reason, as do all traditional broadcasters, to view the change that is taking place with some concern. There is absolutely no question that the huge increase in choice available through the streaming services has led to a decline in linear TV viewing. Already, it has fallen from something like 72% of viewing down to predicted 61% within the next 5 years. And it's also suggested in one survey that of the linear TV viewing at that time, less than 13% will come from those aged under 35. We're already seeing that young people more and more are turning to video on demand services. And that does beg the question about whether or not the licence fee model, which has been based on the fact that everybody uses the BBC, can continue. So whilst it was very clear that when we drew up the current charter a couple of years ago, that the licence fee model was the best means of continuing to fund the BBC, and I think that is still the case now, It may well be, but when we come to the next charter, we will need to look at alternatives. But the one proviso I enter is that a lot of people say they have a wide choice of streaming services. They can go to Netflix, they can go to Disney now, they can go to Amazon. We need to bear in mind that there is a significant proportion of the population who do not have access to any of those services and who at the moment rely upon Freeview. Many of them will say they don't want to meet the cost of a broadband subscription. They're perfectly happy to have the choice of the traditional public service broadcasters and a few others through Freeview. And whilst they are on Freeview, it is not possible to introduce a subscription TV service. The technology does not allow it. So before you can consider moving to subscription as an element of the BBC's funding, it will need to be for everybody to be capable of receiving video on demand. And that, I believe, will come. The rollout of broadband is very fast. We will reach universal coverage, and there will come a time when it would be possible for us to move towards a full subscription service for everybody. But that time has not yet arrived. And therefore, I do believe that this is a debate which will continue and will become more relevant as we reach the time of the next charter renewal in about 6 years' time. But for the moment, it is the case that the licence fee still remains the best and in many ways the only means of funding universal TV supplied through the BBC. But thank you. I'd like to thank all those honourable members that have taken part. We have, I think, had 21 contributions during this debate, which just demonstrates how widely there is a feeling about this subject, even though opinions on it do diverge quite dramatically, as we have seen.
Thank you, Minister. I now go back to Jonathan Gullis for concluding comments.
Thank you so much, Chair, and I welcome all those who have contributed in the debate and the Minister's response. And I think, as he says correctly, that this is a wide-ranging debate that existed long before I was a Member of Parliament in this place and will continue probably long after I've gone, maybe. But ultimately, it's a debate that is important to have. And as someone who grew up on Dad's Army and Porridge and loved those traditional BBC programmes of the past, I do reiterate that sadly the BBC has moved, as my honourable friend, the member for Orpington said, has moved beyond what it used to be. And I believe that in a time of choice and a time of value for money, well, value for money is when I'm able to choose if I want to pay something, not I have to pay for something, which means that choice doesn't exist. And ultimately, I think that we need to just trust the British people to back and vote with their feet, which I think will still probably back the BBC in more ways than we suspect. I'm not here saying let's bring down the BBC. I'm certainly not pushing, as was referred to by one honourable member, an extremist agenda. I'm very happy for the BBC to continue existence. I just want to decide whether or not I have to pay for it or not. So I'm very grateful for all the members who took part. I'm very grateful for the petitioner. It's one of the great things about democracy that we get to speak on behalf of those who've signed petitions in this place, and I look forward to taking part in many other petition debates on a massive range of issues in the future.
Thank you, and thank you to everyone who attended today's session, and thank you to our frontbench speakers who responded to the debate, and thank you to broadcasters and to Hansard and all the staff who I know work incredibly hard to facilitate these online sessions. So thank you very much indeed. Order, order,